but I got to ask you this question. I've been waiting to ask this. If electric cars are so swell, how come government has to pay people to drive them?
So I think
Senator Kennedy is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know any fair-minded person that wants us to default on America's debt. You don't have to be Mensa material to understand that the consequences would be terrible. And I want to thank President Biden for agreeing to meet with the Speaker. I thought he should have done it sooner. You can only be young once, but you can always be immature. And I thought he was being a trifle immature. I hope he'll negotiate in good faith. Please, 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 Mr. President, negotiate in good faith. Please, with sugar on top. I don't think you want to be responsible for defaulting on America's debt. I believe you're better than that. Mr. Riddle, let me ask you a couple of questions. Did you know that since the 1950s we have had 10 periods of disinflation in America? Did you know that?
Did not have that exact number, but that makes sense.
Okay, and disinflation is when inflation is too high and we have to reduce the rate of growth of inflation. It's not deflation where prices go down. We just reduce the rate of growth. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you know that if you look at history at all 10 of these times when we had to reduce inflation, that in order to get inflation down 2%, we had to raise, on average, the Federal Reserve had to raise interest rates such that it raised unemployment about 3.6%. Did you know that?
That sounds similar to what Mr. Summers has said. He's made similar points. That sounds very correct.
Okay. All right. So the current unemployment rate is 3.5%, is it not?
Yes.
And the current inflation rate is 5%, is it not?
Approximately, yes.
So if history tells us in order to get inflation down 2%, the Federal Reserve has to raise interest rates such that it increases unemployment 3.6%, then if you do the math, given that the current unemployment rate is 3.5% and the current inflation rate is 5%, that would indicate, would it not, that the Federal Reserve, if history is any indication, will probably have to eventually raise interest rates to between 7 and 8%. Is that correct?
It could have to go that high depending on how the economy responds to current rate hikes.
Okay. Now, can we agree that the best way to get inflation down is to attack it on the fiscal side and the monetary side?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Federal
We
Reserve
can agree on that?
Tool, which is
We
to
can agree on
grind
that?
the economy into a recession.
Okay, we can agree on that. And when you attack it on the monetary side, the Federal Reserve raises interest rates. It's trying to slow the economy. It doesn't want to, but the way you measure the slowing of the economy is the unemployment rate. When you attack it on the fiscal side, you reduce your rate of growth of spending and debt accumulation. Did I describe that right?
You did.
So is it not the case that if you vote against slowing the rate of growth of spending and debt accumulation, you're voting to raise interest rates even higher, are you not?
Generally, I would agree with that approach, with that viewpoint. Yes.
I mean, that's just basic economics 101, right?
Right. The Federal Reserve's tool is.
I mean, that's something Senator Portman taught you, didn't he? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me ask you a couple more questions. Mm-hmm. So, putting aside all the politics here, we're talking about people's lives. If we don't reduce the rate of growth of spending and debt accumulation, Jay Powell's going to do what he's got to do to get control of inflation. And he's going to keep raising rates. And that's going to put people out of work. He doesn't want that. But if he has to raise rates between 7 and 8%, then that could put 6, 7, 8 million people out of work. Dr. Zandi, I have to ask you this. You made some pretty bold predictions today, and some of them I agree with and some of them I don't. But were you at Moody's in the mid-2000s when Moody's graded a lot of these mortgage-backed securities, AAA and A, good as gold, that promptly tanked and almost dragged down the world economy. Were you there then?
No,
Or was that before your time?
it was before my time. I sold my company to Moody's in late '05.
I'm glad you missed that.
Yeah.
If you were there, I hope. Let me ask you.
And actually, if you're interested, I can send you a couple studies I did at the
Please do.
time that you would
That'd be
find
great.
very interesting.
I wish you'd, Moody's had them then.
Yeah.
Ms. I can't see your name. I can't see.
Hopper.
Ms. Hopper. Ms. Hopper, I love solar energy. I just want you to know that. And I love electric cars. But I got to ask you this question. I've been waiting to ask this. If electric cars are so swell, how come government has to pay people to drive them?
So I think, as like most government policies, right, are put in place to incent certain behaviors, and so that's part of the policy is that if we want more electric
But if they're
cars,
so swell, why couldn't they, just in a competitive market, people, why wouldn't they be choosing electric cars over internal combustion engine cars?
I think
Why do we have to pay people to drive them?
but I wouldn't characterize it as paying people to drive them, but I would.
Well, sure we are. We're
I would
giving a big old
characterize
tax
it
credit.
as the government having a policy to incent more purchase of electric vehicles.
Okay.
Senator
I'm out of
Stabenow.
time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Global emissions.
You don't know,
right now.
do you? You don't know, do you?
You can do the math. We need to.
You don't know, do you, Mr. Secretary?
So we're 13% of
If
global
you know,
emissions.
why won't
If
you
we
tell
went-
me?
If we went to zero, that would be 13%.
You don't know, do you? You just want us to spend $50 trillion.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here. I want to tap your expertise for a moment. Give me your best estimate, just an estimate, I know, of how soon you think the United States of America will be carbon neutral.
So I think, according to the climate scientists around the world, and certainly the cutting edge scientists that we need to rely on here in the U.S., we've got to get carbon neutral by 2050. And I'm very comfortable with that target, and I think that's the appropriate target,
By 2050.
which is only 27 years. That is not a long time away.
And how much will that cost?
So the cost that I focus on even more is all the costs
No,
that
the
are going
total
to happen
cost.
if we don't get our
How much
act
will it
together.
cost to get us carbon neutral?
It's going to cost trillions of dollars, and it'll cost tens of trillions of dollars if we don't get our act
How
together.
many trillions?
I don't have the estimate or the numbers in front of me. I've seen a variety of different estimates, but it's a large amount. Fundamentally transforming our energy
Tell me
economy
the
is a
estimates.
big deal.
Tell me the estimates that you've seen.
I don't have those numbers right on hand.
So you're advocating that we become carbon neutral, but you don't know how much it's going to cost.
So there's an awful lot of estimates out there. It
Yeah,
depends
but
on technology
you're the
improvement and other
deputy
kinds of
secretary.
things.
You're the expert.
I
Give me an
know
estimate
with
of
a
how much
certain-
it's going to cost.
I know with the certainty of all the experts I've spoken about, it's cheaper to get our act together than it is to not get our act together on climate change.
Okay, then tell me the cost
Orders
versus
of
the
magnitude.
cost that if we don't do it.
I think it's orders of magnitude different. If
I
we don't
know
get our
that,
act
but
together,
you-
it's
you
tens or
don't
hundreds.
have a cost. You want us to get there, but you can't tell the American taxpayer how much it's going to cost. Is that your testimony?
It's going to save us money, and there's a lot of jobs.
Well, how do we
a lot of
know if you
American
don't know how much it's
manufacturing.
going to cost?
I'd be happy to pull up the latest numbers that I've seen.
How about
Compare
$50
notes.
trillion? Is that right?
It's going to cost trillions of dollars. There's no doubt about it.
Okay. If we spend trillions of dollars and we achieve, some of your colleagues estimate 50 trillion, and it disappoints me that you're not willing to give the estimates. I hope you're not telling me you have no idea how much it's going to cost. That creates a whole new host of problems. But if it costs $50 trillion, as some of your colleagues have testified, to become carbon neutral by 2050, and I'm all for carbon neutrality, by the way, how much is that going to lower world temperatures? Or how much is that going to reduce the increase in world temperatures?
So every country around the world needs to get its act together. Our emissions are about 13% of global emissions.
Yeah, but if you
right
could
now.
answer my question, if we spend $50 trillion to become carbon neutral in the United States of America by 2050, you're the Deputy Secretary of Energy. Give me your estimate of how much that is going to reduce world temperatures.
So first of all, it's a net cost. It's what benefits we're having from getting our act together and reducing all of those climate benefits. We're seeing.
Let me ask again.
hundreds of
Maybe
billions
I'm
of dollars
being,
right now
maybe I'm not
in the
being
country.
clear. If we spent $50 trillion to become carbon neutral by 2050 in the United States of America, how much is that going to reduce world temperatures?
This is a global problem. So we need to reduce our emissions and we need to do everything we can.
How much,
to
if we do our
influence other
part, is it
countries.
going to reduce
So
world temperatures?
we're 13% of global emissions.
You don't
right
know,
now.
do you? You don't know, do you?
You can do the math. We need to.
You don't know, do you, Mr. Secretary?
So we're 13% of
If
global
you know,
emissions.
why won't
If
you
we
tell
went-
me?
If we went to zero, that would be 13%.
You don't know, do you? You just want us to spend $50 trillion, and you don't have the slightest idea whether it's going to reduce world temperatures. Now, I'm all for carbon neutrality, but you're the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Energy, and you're advocating we spend trillions of dollars to seek carbon neutrality, and you can't, and this isn't your money or my money, it's taxpayer money, and you can't tell me how much it's going to lower world temperatures? Or you won't tell me? You know, but you won't?
In my heart of hearts, there is no way the world gets its act together on climate change unless the U.S. leads.
Tell me how much it's
The
going
US
to
needs to
reduce.
lead.
You can't tell me. Either that or you won't.
We're
And
13%,
that's
15%
that,
roughly
the
of
President
global
of the United States needs. I've still got a few seconds. I got 22 seconds. I'm going to use them a different way. Mr. Secretary, shaming you for not answering my questions. Madam Administrator, how are we going to get plutonium pit production back on track?
Well, thanks, Senator Kennedy. We are doing, the most important thing we have to do to get pit production back on track is get craft workers in the facilities, finish our designs, get craft workers in the facilities, and that is happening. And so we have got great confidence between changes we're making in our processes, getting people on board, doing equipment pre-buys, particularly for glove boxes, which are limited manufacturers in the United States, that we will be able to make pits. We're going to be late. We're trying to catch up.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senator Haggerty, would you like to ask a few questions?
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. I'd like to first direct my questions to the Deputy Secretary to talk about small modular reactors. It's a topic that comes up very often as I talk to leaders around the world and to business leaders as well. I think you've had some discussion with Ranking Member Kennedy already today, but I'd like to just establish a couple of basic points first. My first question, does the department consider nuclear energy clean, sustainable, and carbon-free energy? A yes/no answer would be fine.
Absolutely. Nuclear energy is a top priority for us.
And as I said, my colleague, Ranking Member Kennedy, I think, has already confirmed with you that the department would state that nuclear power is the most reliable energy source, and it's not even close. That's a direct quote. And also to quote, nearly 2 times more reliable as natural gas and coal units, and almost 3 times more reliable than wind and solar plants. That's from the Department's Office of Nuclear Energy website. So I'd like to come back to you and ask that given that nuclear energy is clean, carbon-free, and more reliable than other energy sources, do you agree that the United States should be encouraging the production of more nuclear power?
Absolutely, and we've got a lot of fundings, thanks to Congress, to extend the lifetime of our existing nuclear, which is incredibly important. It's about 20% of our overall electricity generation in our country, as you know, Senator. And then also focusing, just as you said, on SMRs, on the small modular reactors, the reactors of the future, top priority for us.
Well, the demand is clearly there, as I said. As I speak with leaders around the world, I was just in Latin America. and talking with leaders there who are trying to make transitions, and they see this as a great opportunity to partner with the United States of America. And also, it's an area that would satisfy important demands while meeting certain climate objectives. My next question is that, given all of that, why aren't we building more nuclear power plants?
So this is where we've got the $6 billion in credits to try to extend the lifetime extension of the existing nuclear, and we're working as quick as we can on the advanced reactor demonstration program at being the leader in small modular reactors. And it's not just Latin America. I was in Latin America as well, where everybody's focused on SMRs and U.S. leadership in that space, but it's Eastern Europe and it's a lot of other countries around the world. So there's huge U.S. domestic opportunities, but there's also a lot of jobs in an export environment as well. So completely agree with you on that point.
I spent a great deal of time in my previous job working with Japan and their energy security and their strategy there. There's also a tremendous demand in developed economies like Japan in particular. That's why I think it's very important to direct our scarce government resources toward technological innovation, increasing efficiency, and doing things of that nature. And my next question is that do you agree that it's in our nation's interest for the next generation of nuclear reactor technology and also the related supply chains and the technologies that are around it to be developed and pioneered here in the United States?
Absolutely.
My concern is that this administration seems to be more focused on pouring billions of taxpayer dollars into wind and solar when we have a serious situation where China controls a lot of the natural resources and a lot of the supplies there, as opposed to being a competitive advantage for America, where in contrast, if we look at nuclear power, it's an area where the United States actually does possess a lead. We can build a supply chain that doesn't pass through China, but it requires us to develop the next generation of this technology right here in the United States. Then in March, the DOE released a series of reports that were focused on green energy technologies, including a report focused solely on advanced nuclear. That report stated, and I'm going to quote, "It's likely that the first design to reach a critical mass of orders may be a Gen 3 plus SMR." I attended an event in March in which the Tennessee Valley Authority, GE Hitachi, Ontario Power, and Synthos announced that they're teaming up to advance the global deployment of grid-scale modular nuclear reactor. That first SMR in North America is going to be built in Canada, not in the United States. However, the next SMR, and the first in the United States, could be built at the Clinch River site in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. You might be wondering why I'm talking about this. That site in Oak Ridge, that site has an early site permit for SMR that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has already issued. So wouldn't deployment in the United States of commercial grid-scale modular reactors be a substantial step toward our leadership in this technology?
Absolutely, and Oak Ridge and Tennessee have had a real leadership for decades in this space.
So my question then, does the department support this project?
So we've been very supportive of projects across the country. We're spending billions of dollars and really prioritizing this. And the quicker we can get this technology available in Tennessee, across our country, and across the world, the better the world will be.
Does the President's budget request have any funding for this particular project in it?
So the President's budget request for this fiscal year took into account that we had some extraordinary funding, especially for the ARDP, the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, through the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. So because there was a significant amount of funding there, we made thoughtful choices and thoughtful decisions to make sure that we had a balanced portfolio across all of our...
In fact, there's zero funding right now. And what I want to do is encourage you to accelerate this because the market opportunity is before us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the questions from my colleague. Know that I think that this is an area where we can and we should be leading. There is no reason why we should not. So I'm with you in supporting your urging to the agency, to the department to advance. I want to talk not about nuclear, but something that I think doesn't get enough attention, and that is the potential for geothermal. We've got great resources, certainly in my state, but we have them in other parts of the country as well. Over the past couple of months, the department issued 2 critical studies, one related to geothermal, and one was the National Transmission Needs Study for 2023. I think both of these studies very important, very timely, but two very glaring omissions. They were national studies, but they somehow or other forgot two states. I just don't understand it. Actually, I find it inexcusable and astonishing that Hawaii and Alaska would not be included, particularly in a study for geothermal. When you're thinking about geothermal heat and volcanoes, what do you think of? You think of Hawaii, you think of Alaska. And so it was remarkable. We saw one briefing provided to Congress. The slide simply showed the resources in the lower 48, and there was a question mark over Alaska and over Hawaii. And in the GeoVision report, the department cites a couple reasons for the exclusion, and they said that the modeling that was used was primarily designed for the contiguous United States. Okay, I can kind of get that. But the fact of the matter is Hawaii and Alaska are never going to be part of the contiguous United States. And so if we're going to just completely keep them out of any future assessments, I think we would agree that that's not right, that's not reasonable. So I would ask you to commit to conducting a study of the geothermal resources that we have in Alaska and in Hawaii.
Well, let me say this, Senator, and I'm not sure this is done that often in DC hearings, but we need to do better.
Thank you.
And I'm heading to Alaska in a few weeks, as you know, and looking forward to having whatever meetings you find helpful to make sure that I'm aware. Our secretary has been up there as well, visiting with you, and making sure that all of us throughout the department, not just our Arctic Energy Office and Aaron Whitney, who's our new leader of that office, but all of us at the department are doing what we should. On the transmission needs study, we have relied on existing modeling for that need study. It's an interim, and now we're putting the final together, and Alaska will be part of that final need study, and we're working on that to make sure. We need to frankly work with you and work with others to make sure we have the modeling, we have the analysis either that we do or that others do so that we can make good resource decisions off on that front. But we're making improvements on the transmission needs study.
Okay.
And on the map issue, I spent a significant time yesterday and today with colleagues at our department. We need to do better on that front.
I really appreciate you recognizing that Alaska is not going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to federal funding because we're not part of that transmission needs study. So I thank you for that commitment. I also thank you for committing that you can do better, and I appreciate the fact that you are coming to the state of Alaska. As you note, Secretary Granholm has had an opportunity to be up north, see one small geothermal community, if you will. We're certainly happy to include you in that site visit, but there's a lot more certainly that we can look to. The grid resilience issue and transmission needs study. The Matanuska Electric Association and our Alaska Energy Authority are working together on applications for funding for the grid resilience and the innovation program, the GRIP program. You're going to be getting a letter pretty soon from me and the other members of the delegation in support of these applications. But if Alaska was included in the transmission needs study, you would absolutely see that it is in desperate need of transmission upgrades, probably more so than any other region in the country. The bipartisan infrastructure bill funds represents an incredible opportunity for us in Alaska to stabilize an aging grid by bringing it to modern standards, enhancing resiliency in the face of unprecedented natural disasters, climate change, rugged geographic terrain. These improvements are really, I can't underscore enough how critical they are to preparing our state for a fuel-diverse, clean energy future, as well as integrating new sources of energy along this. And so as you're planning your trip, If we can make sure that this is on your itinerary, we will work with you in advance. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to discuss more of these, as well as what we're doing with small hydro, the Arctic Energy Office that you have noted, and then the opportunities for potential resources related to our critical minerals. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank the committee.
I want to turn back to you, Deputy Secretary, for just a moment on an issue that Secretary Granholm raised with the Senate Energy Committee last month. She said that an additional $1 to $2 billion investment injection is needed to boost domestic manufacturing grid infrastructure. Yet the President's budget only requests $75 million for the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains that can be used to accelerate the production of domestic energy technologies, including, I'm going to quote, critical power grid infrastructure like transformers. This is an area I've got a deep concern in. We've got a real choke point in transformer capacity in the United States. So my question is, why does the budget only request $75 million if the Secretary is indicating we need a lot more funding for this?
Well, thank you, Senator, for raising this issue. This is a real challenge right now on transformers. And I've had several conversations, I'm sure you have, with utility executives and others in this business about just how critical the challenge is right now. We've got something called our Electricity Sector Coordinating Council made up of CEOs across the industry. We created a tiger team to explore this issue and try to make sure that we've got good analysis both on the challenge side and then what we need to do going forward. I know there's some funding, as you said, in the FY24 budget request. I will say I don't think that's enough. I think we need more. And there have been very good conversations with members of Congress, including for last year's supplemental, last year's omnibus, that unfortunately did not come to fruition for a significant amount of additional funding. So happy to have further conversations and appreciate
I would appreciate it if you would follow up with my staff on this. It's a national security issue, and it's not just the transformers, it's the electrical steel components that go into it as well. But these are real choke points that, as you know,
completely agree.
A critical national security issue. Thank you for updating us on that when you get your team together with ours.
And we both know that, Counselor. Do you agree with what these prosecutors are doing, or do you disagree?
Senator, I would have to get a little more detail in order to opine on that.
Are you afraid to give me an answer?
Certainly not, and I'm happy to give you an answer.
Okay, could you give me an answer?
Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilors, congratulations. Mr. Huey, can you explain the holding in Roe v. Wade to me?
Senator Kennedy, thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
Yes. Roe versus Wade was a 1973 decision of the Supreme Court that recognized a right to an abortion.
Right. Can you explain the tri-semester test to me?
Certainly. There was a 3-trimester test that was then superseded by the Supreme Court's opinion in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. But the essence of the test was that for the first 2 trimesters prior to the assessment of viability in that case, the woman's right to an abortion overrode the state's interests, such that courts would scrutinize any regulations that limited that right.
Okay.
In the 3rd trimester, that balancing would shift, such that the state's interests were greater in that context.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Padine, did I say your name right?
Yes, Senator.
What's the difference between a summary judgment and a motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim on which relief can be granted?
A summary judgment motion is a motion that's filed because there are no issues of fact and it's only an issue of law that a judge disposes the motion on. I'm sorry, the second part?
A 12B6, failure to state a claim on which relief can be granted?
A 12B6, it's a motion to dismiss. It could be for a variety of issues. It could be because they haven't met jurisdictional grounds.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you getting to the point, all 3 of you. Ms. Rudin, what's the Chevron doctrine?
Senator, the Chevron doctrine relates to the extent to which the judiciary will defer to an administrative agency's interpretation of a statute.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Huey. I'd like to ask your opinion on something. We have a number of prosecutors who have chosen, in the name of social justice, not to prosecute an entire class of cases, despite the fact that their legislature has passed these criminal statutes. Do you think that's proper?
Senator Kennedy, I think I can speak to that issue very broadly in the federal context, based on my experience as a prosecutor.
I'm asking just in both contexts, state and federal. I'm asking your opinion on this conduct by some prosecutors.
Well, to phrase my opinion in constitutional terms, on the federal side, Article 2 directs that the president shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed.
Right.
It's long been recognized that there's a principle of prosecutorial discretion.
Let me stop you because I'm going to run out of time, as I think you're aware. Do you agree with what these prosecutors are doing, or do you disagree?
Senator, I agree with the principle of prosecutorial discretion exercised in the interests of the United States.
That's not what I'm asking, and we both know that, Counselor. Do you agree with what these prosecutors are doing, or do you disagree?
Senator, I would have to get a little more detail in order to opine on that.
Are you afraid to give me an answer?
Certainly not, and I'm happy to give you an answer.
Okay, could you give me an answer, Ms. Padine? Do you agree with these prosecutors, or as I described their conduct, or you disagree?
Thank you for that question, Senator. One would have to look at the position that the prosecutor is taking and why they...
I just explained it.
Well,
some prosecutors have taken the position, despite the fact that their legislature has passed a criminal statute, that they're not going to prosecute cases in violation of that statute. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
Senator, I can tell you that if a criminal matter appears before me, I would apply...
I know you would, but I'm asking you your opinion on that prosecutorial decision.
But that's an area that really falls within the executive part of government.
Are you
to
afraid
be able
to give
to
me
address.
an answer?
No, but I think it's a complicated answer.
No, it's not. Do you agree or disagree?
Senator, once again, I'm going to say that it's within discretion of a prosecutor whether to prosecute or not. The voters...
Will you give me an answer?
Senator, I am aware that prosecutors must act consistent with the 14th Amendment. That comes up in connection with selective prosecution.
Yes, ma'am. But do you agree with the prosecutors or disagree?
Senator, I do not, sitting here today, have an opinion on that. It's outside my practice, and it's
Have you thought about it?
It's not anything that I have studied.
Are you aware of the issue?
I am aware of the issue.
And do you agree with the prosecutors or disagree?
Senator, I can tell you that I am aware this is hotly debated in the mainstream.
Yes, ma'am.
And
I'm asking your opinion.
Legislators, I know there are positions on both sides. I have not refined an opinion on that.
Are you afraid to give me your answer?
No, Senator, I would give you an answer if I had it, and I'm doing my best to answer your question, but I do not.
You could have fooled me, Counselor. We both know what we're talking about here. I'm just at a loss why none of the three of you will give me an answer. It's very simple. Do you agree with the prosecutors or disagree? Are you going to give me an answer? I think I got my answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, Ms. Abudu, congratulations. I want to just talk to you, at least initially, a little bit about the law. Ms. Boudou, what is the what's the adequate and independent state grounds doctrine?
Thank you, Senator Kennedy.
You're welcome.
In my practice, I actually haven't had an opportunity to use that principle or doctrine, but my general understanding is that it speaks to the fact that if a federal court is able to resolve an issue based on state law grounds, then that is what should lead in terms of the court's ultimate decision.
Okay. What is the selective incorporation doctrine?
That also, in the voting rights or civil rights context, is a term that I haven't had to come across. But what I do know is that as a legal research and writer, and for sure confronting possibly new areas of law, I look very forward to doing my due diligence in terms of making sure I'm familiar with doctrines such as that one.
Do you know what it is?
So no, I'm not familiar with it sitting here
Selective
today.
incorporation doctrine? Okay. Well, you're going to see a lot of it if you're confirmed on the 11th Circuit. Can Congress pass any law that the Constitution doesn't prohibit?
Based on the frame of your question, I would say yes, that sounds right.
So you think Congress has plenary power?
Well, I would first look to what the Supreme Court has said in terms of following precedent.
No, but I'm interested, if I could, Counselor, in your opinion, does the United States Congress have delegated powers or plenary power?
Well, the Congress has both, I would say, from my general understanding. Again, it depends on the context and the issue, but it is.
Can you explain the difference to me between strict scrutiny and intermediate scrutiny?
Senator, strict scrutiny is the highest level of scrutiny that's often applied in constitutional cases.
What's the definition? I'm sorry, go ahead. Excuse me.
So it requires that a state, when enacting a law or regulation, have a compelling governmental interest for doing so, and that the law is narrowly tailored to achieve that interest.
Okay.
And then intermediate, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay, so intermediate speaks to the issue of having a substantial interest or or an important governmental interest that is substantially related.
Okay. Do you believe that the meaning of the Constitution is immutable, or does it change over time?
Senator, I would say that the Supreme Court in some cases has analyzed that issue, and the response really does depend on the context and the issue. But what the court does or has done in its approach, of course, is look to the plain meaning of a statute or of the Constitution, because that really is where the inquiry should start. And if the language is plain, then that is where the inquiry can end.
Okay, thank you for that. You were involved in a 2021 report from the Southern Poverty Law Center about voting in Louisiana. Did you say, quote, racist white Southerners, close quote, and, quote, hostile white voters and governmental officials in Louisiana continue to make local polling places and early voting locations threatening spaces for black voters? Did you say that?
Senator, I do not believe that I said that. I haven't read that publication in some time.
Will you help write it?
I helped to draft the publication and approved it, but I'm not familiar with that language.
You don't? Okay. In that same report, did you say, well, tell me where in Louisiana local polling places and early voting locations are threatening African-American voters? You said it, so which polling places?
So again, Senator, obviously I don't have that report in front of me to be able to read and remind myself of the examples that might have been shared. But what I can say is that Louisiana.
Let me cut you off because I'm going to run out of time, Counselor. Let me ask you one more. In August 2021, we're not talking 20 years ago, we're talking 2021, you were involved in another report by the SPLC, and you said that voter identification, photo ID to vote, is burdensome and does not serve any legitimate state interest. Do you really believe that?
Senator, identification for voting is
Yes,
something.
but first, do you really believe that? You said it. You meant it?
The Supreme Court in Crawford v. Marion County has already upheld voter ID laws as per se
Yeah, but you said it didn't serve any legitimate state interest. Do you believe that?
Again, Senator, without that language in front of me, it's hard to understand
You
the
said
context.
it. Here it is, August 2021.
Well, there are
I'm
cases.
just asking you to explain to me why having to prove you are who you say you are before you vote doesn't serve, you said it doesn't serve any legitimate state interest. I'm just asking you to explain that statement to me.
I understand, Senator Kennedy, and again, without being able to see the language that appears before and after, it's hard for the context.
You deny that you said it?
I can't say that I haven't seen that language in front of me, but what I do know is that there have been voter ID cases in which courts have found
But
that
I know, I'm familiar with the case law, but I'm asking what you think, because you may be on the 11th Circuit. Do you believe that voter ID is inappropriate?
my commitment is to uphold the Supreme Court's decision in Crawford v. Marion
I know, but
County.
here you said it was inappropriate. You deny that?
Well, again, Senator, it would be helpful to know if that section of the report also cites to cases in which federal courts have found that certain voter ID laws do pose an burden on voters.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the past year and a half, we've seen a pattern from the Biden administration of nominating ideological zealots to our courts. A moment ago, Ms. Abudu, in answering questions from Senator Lee, you said you understood the difference between an advocate and a judge. Well, I'm sure you do. You've never served as a judge. You've spent your entire life as an advocate. And as an advocate on the extreme left, there has been a pattern of nominee after nominee that have been extreme zealots, but I have to say your nomination, when I look at your record, I find deeply concerning. The last 3 years you've served at the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center is a hateful and extreme place. And their hate, among other things, has led to horrific violence. I'm speaking in particular about the 2012 shooting at the Family Research Council here in Washington. There, a gunman sought to make a political statement by shooting as many members of the Family Research Council as possible, and he sought to smear their faces with Chick-fil-A sandwiches after he murdered them. He was only stopped due to the heroic efforts of the Family Research Council employee, Leo Johnson, whose courage saved many lives that day. The evidence in the case indicated that the shooter had assembled his targets by visiting the Southern Poverty Law Center website of so-called hate groups, where the Southern Poverty Law Center equated the Family Research Council with true bigoted hate groups like the KKK and the Nazi Party. Do you agree with your employer that the Family Research Council is equivalent to the KKK or the Nazi Party?
Senator Cruz, I would first respectfully state that although, yes, I have spent a big chunk of my career as a civil rights lawyer. Early on in my career, I was actually a staff attorney with the 11th Circuit. So I started my career and my understanding of the legal profession from the position of being and representing the court to some extent and making
Okay, but being a staff attorney is not a judge. So could you answer the question, please?
Well, in terms of the...
Do you agree with your employer that the Family Research Council is comparable to the Ku Klux Klan or the Nazi Party?
Senator, as I shared with your colleagues earlier, I can't comment to that. I'm in the legal department.
Well, why can't you? I'm asking if you agree with them. You work for them. That's what they say. Their hateful rhetoric led to an attempted murder. Do you agree with them? You went to work for them knowing that their hate had led to this violence. Do you agree with that or not?
I went to work for the SPLC to help lead its voting rights practice group, and that is
Do you agree with your employer?
Senator, again,
So you're going to refuse to answer that?
Senator, again, I can't speak to work that I did not do.
You can say whether you agree with it or not, correct?
I cannot speak to work, Senator Cruz, that I did not do.
Do you agree with the statement the Family Research Council is equivalent to the Ku Klux Klan or the Nazi Party, yes or no?
I cannot speak to a statement where I played no role in the research or the writing
Why not?
or the publication because I did not, Senator Cruz, respectfully.
I didn't ask if you did it. You went to work for them. Do you agree with them? You're refusing to answer that. Let's move on. What is a white supremacist?
Senator, my general understanding is that a white supremacist is someone who hates people simply based on the color of their skin.
Okay, your current employer has labeled 3 members of this committee, myself, Senator Hawley, and Senator Blackburn, as white supremacists. Do you agree with that characterization?
Senator, I have never referred to you or any member of this committee
Has the
as
Southern
that way.
Poverty Law Center done so?
I'm not familiar with the exhaustive list of policymakers that might have been researched and profiled by another department within the organization that I'm
How many
not.
members of the United States Senate do you believe are white supremacists?
Senator, again, sitting here before you, I would not call any single member of Congress.
But you're
that
proud
way.
to work for an organization that does.
I'm proud to do voting rights work on behalf of an organization that provides pro bono counsel to individuals, especially low-income individuals.
So
living
let me
in the
ask you,
South.
how could anyone who is not on the radical left, how could someone who's pro-life, how could someone who's conservative, how can someone who's religious have any degree of confidence if they were to appear in a court with you as a judge? You've spent a lifetime working for groups that smear half this country as white supremacists and Klansmen. That is offensive. My dad came as an immigrant to this country from Cuba with nothing. That is hateful language. How could any litigant expect to get a fair shot if you were a judge, given your advocacy and history of extreme advocacy?
Because, Senator Cruz, my father came to this country with nothing in his pocket as well.
But why don't you give that grace to others?
I do, Senator. That's what my religious freedom, my free speech work, my voting rights work, my criminal justice work, Senator Cruz, all of that work that I've done represents my commitment to making sure that all people at least have equal access to justice and equal justice under law.
Thank you.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees, and thanks for being here. Ms. Abudu, if I could just start with you. You said to Senator Ossoff just a couple of minutes ago that you believe in the First Amendment, right?
Absolutely.
And you told him that you have litigated cases under the various clauses of the First Amendment, and you said that you think that free speech is essential. Is that right?
That is correct.
And freedom of thought is essential, you also said. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What about the right to counsel? Is that also essential?
The Sixth Amendment and the Supreme Court have said so.
So, what would you think about your organization calling other members of the bar, saying that it is their goal, your organization's goal, to destroy other members of the bar who provide litigation, who provide counsel to indigent defendants? I'm thinking particularly of the Alliance Defending Freedom. Back in 2007, a senior fellow at your organization said in a speech that, "I want to say plainly, our aim in life is to destroy these groups," referring to the Alliance Defending Freedom and others. Just to be clear, these are groups that provide representation to indigent defendants and to other defendants, other plaintiffs, counsel, litigants. I want to say plainly that our aim in life is to destroy these groups, to completely destroy them. To completely destroy them. Do you think that's appropriate rhetoric for someone to use about opposing counsel or a member of the bar? Do you think that's an appropriate goal to have?
Senator, I would first say that I'm not familiar even with the language that you just cited, but I will say that my work, again, and I stand on my record, is to ensure that all people have access to counsel to vindicate their rights.
Do you think that this is appropriate rhetoric from a senior fellow at your organization?
Senator, again, not having that language in front of me, not understanding the context, I can't even respond to that.
Oh, you can't say it's inappropriate?
Without more information, without
Really?
context, and without seeing it.
That's interesting. Now, you said to this committee repeatedly that all you do at the Southern Poverty Law Center is voting rights. That's not what you said in your questionnaire to the committee, though. You said that you oversee litigation related to hate groups. So let's talk a little bit more about hate groups, which apparently you oversee the litigation for. Is it your position that organizations like the Alliance Defending Freedom are a hate group?
Senator, I would want to review that language because in terms
Which language?
Regarding the overseeing the organization's research and profiling of hate groups, I don't work in that part of the...
Let me just quote for you. Further, as the Director for Strategic Litigation, I've taken on significant managerial responsibilities, including overseeing all of the organization's legal programmatic work, which in addition to voting rights, includes immigrants' rights, criminal justice reform, children's rights, LGBTQ rights, and litigation related to hate groups.
Thank you for clarifying that it was our legal program.
Right.
And in terms of the cases that the organization has brought, it does include representing individuals who have been targeted on the internet, who have been harassed, whose family has been stalked in terms of, or because of their identity. In the one particular case, because of our client's identity as a member of the Jewish community. And we represented that woman successfully.
Yeah, but you say you oversee litigation related to hate groups. Your organization is infamous for designating anyone who disagrees with it as a hate group, trying to drive them from public life, and in the words of your own employees, trying to completely destroy them. Is that a record that you're proud of?
I am proud of our representation of that woman in that case who simply because of her Jewish heritage was targeted and stalked.
That's not what we're talking about. Let me ask you about the Southern Poverty Law Center more generally. What year did you join SPLC?
February 2021. I'm sorry, 2019.
2019. 2019 was the year that the SPLC paid $3.4 million in response to defamation lawsuits. 2019 was the year that Charity Watch gave your organization an F rating. The SPLC has been labeled by the left-wing policy journal Current Affairs as an outright fraud that uses willful deception designed to scare liberals into writing checks. The progressive journalist Alexander Cockburn said this about SPLC: "I regard it, the Southern Poverty Law Center, collectively as one of the greatest frauds in American life." Liberal death penalty abolitionist Stephen Bright refused to accept an award named after the founder of the SPLC, saying in his words, "The SPLC has long been run by a con man and a fraud." That's from a Harper's Magazine article. Also in 2019, SPLC employees told the press, "We were part of a con and we knew it." That's in a New Yorker article, not exactly a right-wing journal. Are you concerned by any of this record of the organization that you work for?
Senator, what I'm glad that I didn't hear in that litany is a complaint about the voting rights work that we've done, about the clients and the community.
Are you concerned that Charity Watch gave you an F, that you had to pay $3.4 million in response to defamation lawsuits, that you've been criticized, your organization's been criticized as a fraud and a con job, and that you work for an organization who says it's their goal in life to completely destroy their opponents? None of that gives you any pause.
Senator, again, my work with the Southern Poverty Law Center has been to uphold the constitutional rights of individuals who, without pro bono counsel, would not be even able to have access to justice.
I have to tell you, I find your answers absolutely extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. I can't believe you've been nominated for this position. I can't believe that the President of the United States would nominate someone from this organization with this record. And I can't believe that you would sit here today and refuse to condemn this hateful, frankly, violent rhetoric from this organization with this record. It's astounding to me.